Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see some of you again. And for those who this is our first meeting, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're going to be doing two of those things, talking to an interesting person and doing an RPG review for the setting book and adventure module, the Rake's Codex of Nighthaven, Volume 1. The Gates and Their Guardians. Designed for use with any old-school D&D compatible system, this game book comes from RPG designer Ryan Howard. Now, you may remember Ryan Howard from our review of his first module, O Night Divine, which was also set in the city of Nighthaven. So getting into it, let's see how this thing sells itself. Welcome to Nighthaven, an urban black powder fantasy setting for your favorite D20 fantasy game where crime syndicates war for power on the streets and nobles war for power above them. The Rake's Codex Volume 1 presents a detailed description of Nighthaven's Gate District and the factions that operate within it. With this material, an adventuring party can have a campaign's worth of adventure without ever leaving the gates. The sum total of your player's knowledge will be put to the test with Corpse Walk, an introductory adventure where Nighthaven's Gate District is put in jeopardy by a winged monster feeding on the blood of innocents. Moving to the credits page, we see text and layout were done by Ryan Howard. And as I do with all the indie published RPG materials that I can, I also got an interview with Howard after my review of the work. Next up, we have editing by What? Stephen, I can hear my dear friends asking, how did Ryan become such a big deal that he convinced you to work with him? And how can we trust a review from someone who is personally involved in the project? Well, fear not, my dear friends, regardless of how I got involved, my review is going to be objective as possible. Now, of course, there's going to be subjective elements that speak to my personal preferences and predilections. But rest assured, I will not harm whatever credibility I might have with you by selling you a bill of goods and telling you something's good when it's not. And to be clear, nobody asked me to do this review. Ryan did not ask nor pay for me to do this review. But early on in the creation process, I realized what he was cranking out, the material he was creating was so cool, I was going to want to tell you about it anyway, because this is my bag. So I was getting paid to work on something that I really liked. I think this book was so good, I used my own money to buy the copy I used for the review. And as usual, when I'm covering the credits page, I talk a little bit about the creators. And that editor, well, he's got a bit of a track record. He has 8 published works of fiction and edited an autobiography. He's got 2 short story collections, 8 RPG-related works, and 1 special thanks on a really cool module. Going further down the credits page, we get cover art by John Torres. And here's where I prove my objectivity by saying, as nicely as I possibly can, this cover isn't my favorite piece of art in the book. I would have much rather seen one of the interior artists' work grace the front because, in my opinion, their pieces are consistent with the rest of the art, better convey the content, and are much more appealing. More importantly, cover art sells books. This cover might prevent some people from finding out what awesome stuff is behind that cover, but it is what it is. We get interior art from Jesse White, Nolan Collins, Simeon Cochran, and dear friend Keelan Halverson. And while they're all good, I want to share my favorite pieces from Nolan Collins to show off some of the jaw-dropping work between these covers. I mean, just look at this. These are amazing. And several times during the creation process, Howard would send me some of Nolan's work, and my praise was 100% heartfelt. This is a compelling look. And while I had never heard of him, I found Nolan's website and can see he is clearly something of a big deal. I'll put a link to his site in the description below so you can go feast your eyes. For cartography, we get maps from Keelan and Delfino Falciani. While they don't have on-map keys, the accompanying text explains how to use them, which works, and they look good. Moving past the credits, we get a helpful table of contents, and to boil it down, across the 6 chapters plus appendices, this book provides 4 things. 1, the Nighthaven setting with geography and history. 2, 3 playable factions woven into that setting. 3, adventures in an optional sequel. And 4, some cool magic items. For the setting material, factions, and key NPCs that we're going to talk about, I'm not going to issue a spoiler warning for those because that's setting material that might be of interest to anybody. Now, when we get to the adventure, I got a big old fat spoiler warning to throw at you. Chapter 1 gives us a history of Nighthaven, opening with this ridiculous quality art This is why I rave about the interior art, because just look at this. Starting with the setting of Nighthaven and its history, this background read to me like an interesting story told from an in-world perspective, much like the books in the Elder Scrolls series do with both reliable and unreliable narrators, making it more messy and so more natural. It's not dry and tedious like Forgotten Realms books, and I found the years and events move by quickly. It's an easy read. Our narrator throughout the book is called the Rake, an unnamed person or group of people adventuring in Nighthaven who collect the city's secrets and lore and journal entries that, when combined, form this and future planned codices. That's our framing device, and we get frequent sidebars with direct quotes from the scribes responsible for the work, and I found they added depth and a lived-in feel to the material. Alright, so situated on the northwest edge of the continent of Darahome, so basically fantasy Seattle, just with less crime and fewer homeless people, Nighthaven was built by the dwarves who found the valley made the perfect ambush route to attack the racial supremacist elves' capital, since the elves had launched a genocidal 150-year war against the dwarves because their king refused to call the elf lord Mazellarine by the title he demanded. Nice and reasonable like that. The race of man, along with the dissenting elves, found common cause with the dwarves and defeated Mazellarine's elves, and the dwarves set up a mining outpost in the ambush valley. Unfortunately, Mazellarine's elves were sore losers and continued to raid the dwarven settlement and its caravans, so the dwarves, depleted of manpower from the war, asked King Cromwell of the Mannish Kingdom for help, so he stationed a garrison there to fight off the elves. It worked. Mining, industry, and trade boomed, and King Cromwell granted the Riordan family the growing city as a barony. The city grew and had some boom and bust cycles, and the reason for that might have something to do with that spot on the map figuring into elven legend. Long considered a cursed place by the elves for some unknown reason, they had called the place the Black Port to denote its ominous character, and wrote a prophecy stating, "The doom of reality slumbers in Nighthaven." The elven Nighthaven was corrupted into Nighthaven, and what the prophecy means exactly is up for debate. But you'd be forgiven for thinking it had something to do with the next big war where the unrepentant elves still seethed over their lessers defeating them, and so began worshipping dragons. Well, dragons in this setting aren't natural or simply magical flying lizard creatures. No. They're essentially demon prince scale threats from hell. So when the elves came up with a mad cult bent on bringing them into the world and somehow becoming godlike dragons themselves, things got bad. Very bad. Called the Dragonheart Cult, we saw a remnant of it in O Night Divine, and it's a proper horror show. Corruption had wrecked the empire of King Cromwell's descendants from within, so this new war by the elves and dragons shattered what was left, and genocide and demon dragon horror reigned for the next 25 years. Both dragon and elf considered Nighthaven a blight, so it was given to the savage worm lord Grath the White. Known even among dragons for his legendary cruelty, Grath turned Nighthaven into a frozen hellscape. For fun, Grath forced Baron Riordan's youngest son, Castor, to watch as Grath ate his father, mother, and older brothers alive before Castor could escape. After decades of atrocity, the men, dwarves, and rebel elves banded together under the leadership of Cromwell IX to overthrow the Worm Lords. A man by this time, Castor Riordan slew Grath in the Battle of Nighthaven and was granted his family's ancestral land and title. Cromwell IX sacrificed himself in glorious battle against the dragons, and the Alliance won the day. The continent of Darahome has been free ever since. And since the city sits beneath what looks like a dragon's maw, maybe Nighthaven's history involving dragons isn't over, and what the apocalyptic prophecy was talking about has yet to pass. But I think we might get a little flavor of it in this adventure. Modern day for the setting starts 30 years after all that. The city is booming once more, and now Baron Castor Riordan is an old man, happy to rest on his laurels, leave governing the city to a council, and play at nightly tournaments. Industrial innovation is a thing, as Nighthaven leads the continent in developing firearms technology and metallurgy, while also serving as the regional hub for religious, magical, and academic studies. We get a teaser for the Tower of Zalev, where mages go to study under the great Magus Supremus, Nador de Mestre, so I expect we'll hear more about him in a future product. And I'm a sucker for Towers of High Sorcery. The corruption that ruined the empire of men is seeping back, and from both the ruling class above and the desperate underclass. So what we're getting is a black powder cutthroat intrigue setting. Howard details the races present in the city, demographic breakdowns, and some interesting descriptions of race relations in each race's outlook. While there is some racial variety here, this is not a fantasy petting zoo with every possible race represented everywhere, all getting along with no problems whatsoever. With the passage of time, a few Mazzellarite elves have taken advantage of lesser races' shorter memories and wormed their way back into society, using propaganda to make themselves look good, while those who remember still despise them for the atrocities they committed and probably would happily do again. Dwarves remain in their industries and view the world in a straightforward manner, and so don't fully trust the mercurial humans. A small number of halflings work in town as traders, innkeepers as shopkeepers, and see the elves as conniving snobs, dwarves as hard-working, happy drunks, and men nearly impossible to pin down. A tiny amount of orcs and goblinoids work on the peripheries, mostly in mines and gangs since they're violent brutes. And the handful of half-elves sit in an unhappy middle ground. The privately demon-worshipping racial supremacist elves would rather kill them than accept them into the family, while humans view them with suspicion born of the elves' bad reputation. The write-up on gnomes, though, it had me cackling. Quote, "Gnomes are the rarest of all races. So rare, in fact, that a common belief among the uneducated is that gnomes are imaginary, or just a variety of halfling. Their services as craftsmen are highly sought after, though, and some believe them to be omens of good luck." That strikes me as some of the magic pygmy theories of modern-day Africa, which would be amusing if it wasn't actually horrifying. The only gnome I've been exposed to in the Nighthaven setting is Sinbar Clockwright, one of the bad guys from O Night Divine, and he was a nasty piece of work. So while I usually don't give a crap about gnomes, I got the feeling that in this setting, the gnomes are all going to have very strong personalities and interesting stories. With that background, we move into the city itself in Chapter 2, the Gate District. Since this is Nighthaven's first setting book, it does make a lot of sense to start with the point of entry, and it drips with flavor. All that text about corruption in the background, we give players a chance to learn it right off the bat. The moment travelers reach the gates, the city guards halt them for inspection, questioning, and potential theft with accompanying mechanics, while tax assessors go through their belongings and shake them down for gold. There's a taxes by professions table listing going rates for different classes of entrance, and Howard's assessors are as clever as they are unscrupulous, so players will have to work to outsmart them or be ready to bribe their way into easy entry. Now, before players decide to hate on the guards, remember, the guards are a faction that the players can join in on and engage in corruption themselves. Key guard figures to know are the Gate District Garrison Commander, Captain Reginald Carver, a noble son hoping to use his officer's commission to social climb into the Baron's Special Forces, and Carver's right-hand man, a complete jackass known as Lieutenant Lionel Sim. Where Captain Carver prefers finesse to solve problems, Sim is a brute, more intent on bashing heads until someone confesses. The guards make travelers promise to obey the laws, which Howard lists along with the punishments. In a move that may shock some players, but makes complete sense to non-crazy people, walking around in heavy armor and festooned with weapons is actually against the law, because the guards are smart enough to spot troublemakers before they go on a rampage. While anyone can walk around lightly armed for self-defense, it is possible to earn the right to armor up, such as belonging to a religious order or working as a professional in security services. And the prohibition on heavy armor also breeds creativity, with people not wanting to die in a bar fight inventing concealable armor, such as unassuming pieces made with night steel, a type of ultra lightweight and durable metal found in the mines. The Gate District is mostly dedicated to meeting the needs of travelers, so there's plenty of merchants, inns, pubs, brothels, casinos, and a favorite of passing mercenaries, the Temple of Cador, the Lord of Justice and Battle. The rector, Brother Clement, is a former squire turned cleric who abandoned his knightly ambitions when his lord died under sketchy circumstances, and instead dedicated himself to a higher, more noble purpose. The Rake's take on Brother Clement's temple puts it well. A weary soul finds rest at the sellsword's mission. It's a modest stone building, notable only for the large, mace-shaped steel of Cador carved on its heavy oaken door. Brother Clement is a good sword and deadly with a sword. He'll tend to your wounds, pray for your soul, and even help you find the next job every now and then. The best friend a mercenary could ever have. You might be saying, Stephen, my dear friend, you mentioned brothels and gambling. Can we rewind to that bit? My dear friend, yes we can. In the Gate District, those two vocations go hand in hand. Just off the main drag known as Commerce Street, a small collection of roads called the Pleasure Rows. The Rake describes them as 3 streets of non-stop debauchery. It's the spider that has spun her web in the dark corner of the Gate District, luring helpless wanderers into its strands. There is wine, women, food, and gaming to be found everywhere you look. There are no guards, only gangsters hanging around to ensure that their boss gets his piece of the larceny. Since we talked about the guards faction at the gate, the Pleasure Rows are ran by 2 other factions working in tandem. The Knave Syndicate, which runs the gambling, and their Sisterhood of Scarlet Madams, which is the prostitution and burlesque cartel, and a key reason I loved working on this book. The Knaves run the casinos and provide security, and the Scarlet's working girls keep Johns in their seats, drinking and playing. Now that's synergy. The most important casino in the district is the Royal Flush Club, a massive gambling house run by the Knaves' Battens faction, whose top dog is quiet schemer Jormunder Miasmer, with the text saying he would shoot his own mother for a gold piece. Ouch. His front man is Graham Halford, a flamboyant fop known for his quick wit and skill with a pistol. The Scarlet seat of power is the multi-story wonderland, brothel called the Warm Embrace. It is run by Lady Caletrix, but more recently she is withdrawn from the public eye and left the work of running the place to her assistant Pauline. Why the change? Because not long ago, Caletrix fell into the cult of the Liminal Temple and became a vampire, which we will totally read more about later. The last location and key NPC I'll touch on is the rundown former headquarters of the Slayer Society, now haunted by maybe the last of their number, Willem Vanderhoek. An old vampire slayer, he sees vampire conspiracies lurking in every shadow, and few take his drunken rant seriously, whether they're at the bar, at the brothel, to the city guard. I relate to this guy and had to ask Ryan if this was a stand-in for Alex Jones. While Ryan said no, in my headcanon, this is Alex Jones. Then we get the Gate District map, explanatory text, random encounter tables, and guidance that effectively builds up to allowing no prep adventure creation. Howard is correct when he writes, quote, by using the above tables, a GM can turn even the most ordinary day in the Gate District into an adventure in itself. To experience them, the party need only loiter around and wait for danger to find them. That's handy. In chapters 3, 4, and 5, Howard fleshes out the 3 factions players can join. Their histories, how to join, the perks and costs of doing so, how to advance in the faction, and complications that arise from membership. That's all in here. As opposed to the pencil whip D&D 5e factions, these factions are well fleshed out, well thought out, and have so much character in them. I love these things. I have no use for the D&D 5e or 5.5, whatever it's calling itself these days, Adventures League factions. They suck. This is how it's supposed to be done. PCs can join the city guard and serve in a chain of command leading all the way up to Baron Riordan, if they roll 25% or higher on a 1d100 to represent them surviving the 12-week basic training course. Yes, there's a chance they might flunk out. They will start as a pikeman, be assigned to a district guard unit, and receive pay, equipment, a place to stay, and the ability to receive bribes. See, they can get a cut. Pikemen can then either bribe or roll their way into a better job by being accepted into the Musketeer Corps training programs. Now, Musketeer training involves demonstrating advanced skills in weaponry and tactics, passing a written exam, and attending a mock social event where their etiquette and observation skills are put to the test. What test, you might ask? Well, none of the students know this ahead of time, but there they are at this social gathering, and there's at least one noble in attendance, and their teachers are going to stage an assassination attempt on that noble. Now, they're not going to follow through and actually kill the guy, but if in the scenario they assassinate the noble, then everybody in the class fails. But if at least some of the musketeers notice, take action, and save the noble from assassination, they pass, and then this becomes a celebration party. After 18 months of service, a guard can take the exam to become a sergeant, enter the officer training program, or vie for appointment to the Order of the Red Griffin, that special forces unit Captain Carver wants into. Merit is key to be considered for any of these higher ranks, and the dice rolls get harder to reflect the more strenuous training classes, with failure in Red Griffin training possibly resulting in death. And there is one higher group, the Order of the Golden Griffin, but it is limited to 25 political appointees chosen by the High Commander and Commandant of the Nighthaven Guard, Cyrus Rainier. These are the city's generals and get sweet ceremonial armor with feathered wings and lion head helmets. However, you can't just ask, bribe, or roll your way to get in. This is going to be a 100% role-playing feat to accomplish. Now, going back down the totem pole, there is one more guard group you can join, and they have a special spot in my heart. If you're too dumb, too mean, or too criminal to hang in the regular guard corps, they can make you a rat catcher. Being forced into this unit is basically a prison sentence requiring anywhere from 5 to 20 years, doing tasks with the highest fatality rates of any guard unit, like patrolling sewers, catacombs, and caves around the city, intentionally looking for monsters. Their creed is, if it moves, you kill it. And the 3-man teams they operate in include a sergeant with a lantern to spot a monster, a pikeman to skewer it into holding still, and a musketeer to blow its head off. While the job is tough, you can do anything you have to get the job done. The only way you get in trouble as a rat catcher is if you abandon your patrol, and then you will be executed when caught. But if you live long enough to serve out your term, everyone will know you are among the hardest, meanest badasses in the land. And that's cool. We get tables for how the guard reacts to escalating threats, a graft table to help DMs identify what corrupt activity a random guard is up to, and their occupational hazard table. Now, each faction gets one of these tables with over 100 possible monthly events to simulate the complications life throws at you just for belonging to that faction. And I love it. Every month there's a specified chance you have to roll on the chart. And much like the Gate District Random Encounter Table section wrote adventures for you, so do these occupational hazard tables. Now let me read a few possible results to show you how good these are for adventure idea generation. 1. You are the target of a large-scale assassination attempt, bombing, magical attack, etc. Holy crap! And then you roll a 1d6, indicating how that attack went. With a 1, you're at the epicenter of the attack. Save versus death. And if you survive, you gain a permanent wound and require 1d6 months of bed rest to recover. As the number goes higher, you move further and further away from the danger, with a result of 6 indicating the assassin was discovered before he was able to act. And so then it's just a fight with the assassin. Now, if you were to get result number 7, you return home one evening to find it ransacked. Roll 1d4. On an even result, it's a burglary, and 1d100 times 10 gold worth of items were taken. On an odd result, nothing is missing, but an ominous message is found at the scene. Well, crap. That could be very effective for building up mood and tension. Result 20. Your supervisor asks you to carry out a hit. Jesus. Roll 1d6 to determine who your target is. 1. A politician. 2. A red griffin or high-ranking officer. 3. A fellow guard. 4. A rando civilian. 5. A gangster. Or 6. A person you're close to. Yes, they might do that to you. Result 22 says a gangster who was apprehended by you in a raid was released before his scheduled execution. His execution still happened, but you know for a fact that the hanged man was not who the public was told he was. The intrigue, the corruption, the way that these hazards make it personal to the PC, I love this shit. Now, Stephen, you might be saying, my dear friend, you handsome devil, is 100 results really too many? Does this get boring after a while? In my experience, no. As I read each entry, I was eager to see what fuckery was coming in the next one. Pardon my language. I got really excited reading these things. It was endlessly entertained. Next up, we talk about the Knaves, who started as a group of guardsmen who got so into gambling they invented their own card game. It took off so much the original foursome got rich. So they left the guard and started the Knave Syndicate. Competitors wanted some of the pie, industrial espionage happened, trade secrets were stolen, and gang wars broke out. But the Knaves came out on top. They came out so on top, one of their founders got to play a game now spoken of in legend with the king himself, because turns out the king's an avid card player. At the end of a night of nail-biting, stake-raising, and card duels, the knave defeated the king, and to this day, what exactly he won remains unknown. The four founders and their personalities are briefly but evocatively detailed, along with the code they instituted to keep the peace amongst their group, called the Knave's Will and Testament. These 5 tenets are their rule and law, and since it's a fantasy setting, they actually abide by them. Each founder was the head of his suit, so there's a Battens, coins, cups, and swords leader, and that's as high as it goes, meaning the knaves are ruled by a council of equals. Each suit controls different districts to reduce competition between suits and to leave no coin ungambled. Batten specialized in table and street games to lure in travelers. Coins have the most opulent casino in the city and focus on horse racing. Cups focus almost exclusively on pit fights in the seediest part of town. Swords run classier table games and nightly tournaments. All have access to secrets, and information brokering is a big part of their influence game, which is why faction members get a chance to dig up dirt on people and a blackmail table to roll on. Knaves have quite a bit of crossover with the third faction, the Scarlets, because of their shared history. Not that long ago, some knave leaders tried hijacking Scarlet girls, which the madams didn't take kindly to. Murders happened and tensions rose nearly to the point of open street warfare between the knaves and the ladies' hired muscle. However, a last-minute bargain was struck, uniting the two factions. In a case of wedding diplomacy, the faction rulers agreed to marry their second-in-commands to each other, so each suit's front man, or king, enters a political marriage with a ruling madam's appointed queen. The couples coordinate faction business, like the knaves running the casinos the Scarlets work Johns at, violence is averted, everybody makes money, and they keep the peace. You've got to know when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em. Joining the knaves is easy, so long as you can show your loyalty and willingness to do dirty deeds. Each suit has an identical hierarchy, so each new member starts as a low-level associate, or glorified errand boy. The PC is assigned a number card of 2 to 9 and placed under a commander called a 10. It's not a bad gig, since you gain VIP access to any knave club, enjoy high-class living accommodations in their boarding houses, and get paid to do small jobs. Perhaps most importantly, every knave receives free service at Scarlet brothels. While your rank in the knaves determines how often and who you get that service from. This is such a powerful benefit that had the U.S. Army had a morale brigade, I would have never left. Moving up to a 10 requires finding or making an opening and making sure you're the man for the job when it happens. Earning your suit more money than the current 10 is one way to do it, but rolling well on a backstab works too. 10s run entire operations like small clubs, where he has to make the place profitable and send 15% of his take to his bosses. Moving past 10 and into a face card requires cleverness and initiative, because there's no defined path to rising through the face cards, and the guy currently on the job has to get out of the way. If you're good at making money, a skilled hype man, an excellent networker, becoming a king might be for you. They run all operations in a given territory and are next in line for leading the suit. Want to be important but don't like the spotlight? If you're the sneaky, deceitful type, the Joker might be up your alley. Jokers have unlimited budgets and access to poison, blackmail, and any other resource they need to advance the syndicate, focusing on spying and espionage. Since Jokers are the primary force digging for dirt on people, they get to enforce the will and testament, since they know who's really up to what. So they have the authority to kill high-ranking face cards if they're betraying the syndicate. Like violence and assassinations, you want to be an ace, because that's exactly what they do for their suit. Now, the Jack or the Bower is the top man in each suit, because in the card game they invented, Jack beats kings. A PC ascending to Bower becomes one of the most powerful players in Nighthaven. They can reach anywhere in the city because everyone will owe them, fear them, or know you have dirt on them, and your reputation will be riddled with defeated rivals and raking in hordes of cash. Now, the amount of sins a Bower had to commit to get there is legion, and staying there will require even more. On the upside, Bowers get a bang ruling madam, so it's good to be the Jack. Now on to my favorite part, the knave occupational hazard table. Here's some key ones I want to show you, and I could have gone on and on. If you roll a result of 10, a lover or friend has turned their back on you because of your work. Damn, that hurts. Turns out being a crook has its costs. Result 27, 2 customers get into a fight over cheating allegations. Roll a d4. Odd result, 1 customer kills the other. Even result, there are plenty of injuries, but everyone lives. 28. Your casino is hosting a secret high-stakes game. All players are masked, and the pot is a king's ransom. Buy-in is 10,000 GP for each participant. The casino is putting up an additional 200,000 GP. Holy crap, high stakes. 42. An enterprising and well-connected gangster has started shaking down your casino. He's well-connected enough that simply killing him would have massive ramifications. Ooh, that's complicated. 81. A foreign diplomat/noble is assassinated in your casino. You were the last one to see him alive. Oh my God, I could just keep going on. I love these so much. If you somehow think knave life is all glamorous, though, there's a quote from the Rake that I think really brings reality to the role. So let me read it to you. It's all high-stakes cards and buxom wenches until you need to beat a copperless codger to death in a back alley for no reason other than to avoid looking weak. Because at the end of the day, everybody has to pay, one way or another. Our third detailed faction is, of course, my favorite, the Sisterhood of Scarlet Madams. This sex worker guild actually started as a spin-off business from ancient elf Mandrake Hawk's criminal enterprises back in the day. Turns out men like women and will even pay for their company. So while Hawk made good money from the side venture, he got into a gang war and needed to focus his attention and resources. His top girl, a fine redhead named Justine, bought out his hoe business and he got back to scrapping. Now that Justine ran the show, she proved to be an excellent and ruthless pimp, taking over Nighthaven's sex trade and making bloody displays of anybody that tried competing. When Hawk's gang war concluded, he thought to slide over and take his hoes back, but Justine said that would cost his dead body. How'd she have the nerve to say that? Because powerful people like hoes. They get addicted. They pay them gobs of cash. They say too many things they shouldn't around them, and then they get used to blackmail them. And so from all this network money and influence that the hoes were able to accumulate, they're able to marshal plenty of friends from all over Nighthaven to go after their enemies. So Justine had the money and connections to destroy Hawk if he tried to take what was now hers. Amused at her spirit, old Hawk took a bow and walked off. Even with Justine deceased, that's how the Scarlets maintain their position, being the flowers that attract the bees that will sting all their enemies on their behalf. The Scarlets have strict rules they abide by, called the Rules of Intercourse, one of which states, never raise your hand against a man. A gentleman will raise one on your behalf. This keeps Scarlets from losing their wigs, slapping clients that get fresh, and then being pummeled into submission by a physically superior opponent. Instead, they take whatever petty beating they got and then pay male mercenaries to do unspeakable violence on their behalf to the guy who thought that was a good idea, and I think that's a clever tactic. If Scarlets tried violence to settle issues, it'd be easy for unscrupulous types like the knaves to simply crush them en masse because nobody likes a sex worker slapping you out of turn. But by keeping the goodwill of most clients by not resorting to such self-defeating tactics, they can maintain their position. Joining the Scarlets involves two factors. One, being female because male prostitution is illegal and abhorrent in Nighthaven's culture. And two, being willing. A PC presents herself to a madam who judges their beauty, personality, and gets a read on their potential loyalty. They also want to know if the girl can sing, dance, play instruments, or is only good for that one thing. Based on her findings, the madam may admit the PC and give her a job as a prostitute or stage performer. From simple working girl, advancement depends on how much money you pull in, their skill at their job, status of their clientele, and ability to dig up dirt. All that's important. Girls who do well may earn the title of lady, which means they're higher class and can charge appropriately. However, ladies don't run brothels, madams do. To become a madam, a lady is promoted by a ruling madam, and then she runs a brothel, cabaret, or other interest. To become a ruling madam, you have to be elected to the position from lady, and to serve as the leader of the Scarlet Sisterhood, the prima donna, one must be elected by the ruling madams. And apparently backstabbing, politicking, and influence peddling are all critical to this kind of upward mobility. So hope you enjoy living in a den of vipers. Membership brings a place to stay and pay, part of which goes to your madam along with the cost of your food and drink. Madams have to pay 10% of their earnings to ruling madams, and the prima donna doesn't collect a paycheck, but she owns all Scarlet properties and the grand hoard Justine left behind. Just as the knaves do, all Scarlets have access to blackmail material. Men can join as mercenaries for the mercenary group, the Scarlet Hand, and it pays pretty well on a job-by-job basis. Then there's the occupational hazards table. Oh boy, this one gets spicy. Result 1, permanent disfiguring disease is caught. Save versus death. Permanent -5 to constitution if successful, along with disfiguring scars or sores. Can only be removed with a greater restoration, cure disease spell, or a wish. Result 40. The guard want to use your brothel/cabaret as the bait for a honeypot operation, They are not taking no for an answer. Result 70. A cult devoted to a fertility goddess has sprung up. Their idols and iconography of their goddess bear a striking resemblance to you, resulting in a lot of attention. 96. An otherworldly entity has become infatuated with you. Roll 1d6. It could be an incubus, a vampire, a fairy, an angel, a demon, or a god. On 100, well, an ancient temple of dragon worship is discovered under your brothel/cabaret. Oh, and there's a fresh corpse of a sacrifice on the altar. As entertaining as those options are, the biggest downside of being a Scarlet is the job itself. Since the faction trades on blackmail and dirty deeds, people don't trust them. Most clerics refuse to treat their sin-born diseases, and at the end of the day, they're still a whore. You can tell yourself whatever you want to hype it up, but that's still the reality. To wrap up the three factions in this volume, the way they're presented really works. None of them are exactly the same. They have distinct cultures and histories, and you advance in each differently. For the Knaves and Scarlets, you basically have to backstab your way to the top, but in the Guard, you don't have to, since it's purposely structured to allow its members to advance up the ranks without killing each other. There's plenty in here discussing the good and the bad about each, role-playing hints galore, and anybody reading this would have a good idea on how joining a faction will really tie their PC into a living setting. So with all that adventure material baked into the cake already, I have just this to say to you: wait, there's more. Because don't forget, in this codex, we have an actual adventure packed in. And not only is it a cool story, but it succeeds in tying in all three of the playable factions we talked about: the Gate District setting, the key locations, and the named NPCs that we talked about. Nothing that Howard wrote went to waste. It's all showing up here. And that adventure is entitled Corpse Walk. And it starts with this amazing chapter art. Just drink this in. My God. This is a monster hunting adventure module that increases replay value by randomizing certain elements of the adventure. And it doesn't handhold or spoon feed players or DMs. This is not a railroad situation. Howard gives you a scenario, events that have happened, things that have been set in motion, key locations, and different roles NPCs can play. But after the opening hook is given, it's completely up to the players and the DM how this proceeds. There's a formula for where the monster goes when it makes more of itself, and where they go, and it's up to the players to track it down. Hints and help are provided, but if you have players that are used to being led around by the nose and not having to think for themselves, this is going to turn into a vampire apocalypse scenario very quickly, because they won't be doing the things they need to do to keep that from happening. But fortunately, earlier on in the book, in the Guard section, we were told exactly what the Guard does as threats escalate and disasters occur. So Corpse Walk, it's the title of the adventure. What is a corpse walk? I'm going to read the introductory text for you because it paints the picture. The streets of Nighthaven are well acquainted with violence. Criminal gangs do business with blade and bullet, riots drive the city to martial law, and wars have reduced the city to rubble. However, no violence is quite so terrifying to ordinary citizens as the rampages of the undead. These attacks are never ending, as there's an unending supply of corpses for the evil and twisted to create monsters from. These attacks happen irregularly enough to catch hapless victims unaware, just when they let their guard down and started to relax again. Sadly, the victims are all too often helpless to fight against such monstrous assailants. In such times, Nighthaven's guards are dispatched to hunt and kill the monster, lest it disrupt the flow of commerce and the rule of law. Among the guards, these hunts are known as corpse walks, and there are no more terrifying words in the Guard Corps' vernacular. Captains issue corpse walk orders with the joyless solemnity of a judge handing down a death sentence, and the condemned are their own men. No guard wishes to become dinner for a nest of ghouls or the host of a revenant, but sometimes must protect the city. After all, even the most jaded guard recognizes that he and his loved ones live in this city too. What happens when nobody answers the call? What becomes of a city when monsters run amok and the Nighthaven guards do nothing? So the stakes are high. Undead, stakes, you get it? But beyond this point, there are spoilers. Since this isn't a decades-old module, I will be more circumspect on the nitty-gritty here, because it's a fascinating challenge and I don't want to ruin it completely. But I want to give you something to work with to see why I think this is cool. Also, since the module doesn't run on Rails or mandate that a party does X, Y, or Z before they proceed to location F, once the opening scene's done, there's no set way for the party to move forward. They can proceed however they want. The party is approached by members of the Gate District Guard Garrison with a request for help. Several murders have happened in the district, and the guard investigated, but before they could get to the bottom of it, they were told to stand down with the order coming from the top, High Commander Cyrus Rainier himself. If called to future murder sites with matching details, the instructions are to do the bare minimum and kibosh the investigation once they leave. All the details point to this being undead related, which as we covered is a big deal. The guards are afraid, thus them going quietly out to some adventurers they may not even know in their desperation. And the offer they have for the player characters is good, too. Up to 500 gold pay, the right to collect bounties, which non-deputized people normally can't do in Nighthaven, and the clearance of any legal problems the party may have. And as you can tell, that's probably a very valuable service. The guards can point out where the attacks took place, and then it's on the players to investigate, because the guards have to then back off. They can't have their superiors finding out that they're investigating when they were told not to. The DM is free to determine how many attack victims died, but there are 2 known survivors and 1 that went missing. A monster has been seen during the attacks, mostly taking place in the Pleasure Rose, and witnesses describe that monster as a giant bat-like creature. The giant vampire bats are not new to Nighthaven, but this one's between 7 and 10 feet tall. Attacks seem to go the same way. The creature swoops down out of the black night, grabs someone. The victims struggle at first, but quickly go silent, as though in a trance, and some say the monster flies away with its victim, but others say the monster drinks its victim's blood on the spot. It has most often been spotted atop the Warm Embrace, but its last known attack was on the Royal Flush. And who was its victim out front the casino? None other than King of Batten's Graham Halford, the rock and roll peacock we discussed earlier, and he is mad. He tells the party everything he knows and offers them 500 gold if they bring that monster back alive because he wants to murder it himself. He's been attacked twice by this thing, and he's certain it's not by accident. There's more drama to be had at the Royal Flush, though. Halford's boss, Jormungandr Miasmer, is in his office and also pissed. PCs may find their way into conversation with him because they may notice a distinct lack of Scarlet girls working the casino floor, and if they inquire as to why, they can find out there was a big falling out between the Battens and Scarlets. His boy Halford's wedding to their proposed Queen Caletrix was supposed to happen 2 weeks ago, and she backed out without explanation and left her assistant Pauline to run interference. Since the Kings and Queens arrangement is the only thing keeping the 2 factions from open war, this is bad, and Miasmer knows it. If the party goes to the Warm Embrace, Pauline actively discourages any talk of the monster, and Halford might be there, desperately trying to get in to see Lady Caletrix. And she not only refuses to see him, she refuses to see anyone during the day, and at night only sees clients paying at least 1,000 gold for an appointment. If the party gets a working girl alone, she may share that Caletrix has been acting strangely for months and only leaves her room at night. Should the party get into Caletrix's rooms and snoop, they find 2 interesting documents. A pamphlet from the Liminal Temple, a cult dedicated to the undead dragon god Liminus, and a letter from the High Commander who ordered a stop to the guards' investigations. Now, these are fun reads. And Caletrix is at the center of the plot, but does not have to make an appearance in the adventure for a successful conclusion. Smart players may realize if undead are involved, the crazy old lech, Willem Vanderhook, might be a good person to ask, and boy howdy he is. It's not hard to find him. He's seen the creature, and he knows exactly what it is, if not who it is. He can coach the party on how to fight it, let them into the dilapidated Slayer Society headquarters, and share special items to help fight vampires. I get why Ryan didn't want to flesh out the Slayer Society as a playable faction, because at this point it's one old guy. But you better believe me, if I was playing this and I got in good with Willem, I would move into the Slayer's headquarters and start the Nighthaven chapter of Ghostbusters. The Temple of Cador and Brother Clement can be of limited help, since Clement wants to do something about this, but doesn't have the money to hire mercenaries or the time to spare going himself. But since Clement was able to turn the beast with his holy symbol, That's a crucial detail he can share to help the party know what it's up against. It is undead. If the players haven't heard of Willem, he can point them to the old monster hunter. If the party has the gold, Clement has the mercenaries to lend out, and he will heal and do anything within his power to end this threat, because one of the men staying at his mission was a victim, Lord Thomas Foss, who is visiting the city. He's recovering here, and he fears for his wife, who the monster flew off with, and he'll offer 1,000 gold for her return. Seeking help from the guard is a terrible idea, because Lieutenant Sim, that jackwagon I talked about earlier, is eager to enforce the order to stay out of it, and will come after the party if he finds out they're snooping around. The guard has given all the help they can give. Further involvement with them is just inviting disaster on the party. Without revealing all the details involved, basically Caletrix hated the idea of a forced marriage to Graham Halford and fell for the siren song of the Liminal Temple, who turned her into a vampire. She turned a very important ne'er-do-well in the city into the monster vampire flying around attacking people, because she wants him to murder Halford so she doesn't have to marry him. She's also blackmailing very important people to keep them out of her way. So Halford is right. He's the target. It's a really cool, sordid, hurtful plot. And I'm like a cat rolling in catnip, just purr. No, this nasty business. Oh, I love it. You got to remember, the vampire game was a very important part of my role-playing history. And this kind of petty nastiness, it's good. So how do the players find and defeat the vampire? Well, Howard provides tables to randomize where the vampire will be night to night and who his victims will be, so they may run into him that way. And there are also chances each night the vampire has made more undead, and then he tells us how to determine where those spawn go and if they make more vampires. So if the party's not on top of things, like I said, the district could easily be overrun by fledgling vampires in short order if the DM rolls hot, so the threat is real. The party may track the vampire back to an abandoned guard tower where he hides by day. It's not an easy place to get into, but if they do, they find the treasure hoard he has collected to impress Caletrix, and sadly, the missing and now dead wife of Lord Thomas Foss. Disturbingly, when examined, there's a pretty good chance she rises as a vampire and attacks the party. If the party defeats the monster in his lair in the streets, we get some juicy aftermath details ranging from the fate of important NPCs and factions, how the PCs can profit from the affair, and how some NPCs try to take revenge on them. Character arcs develop or end in bitter shame. The PCs may earn reputations as saviors, which could be tarnished by how they use the blackmail material they acquire. One door closes and many more open, making this a dynamic adventure that places the characters right in the heart of the drama that's making this city work, tying them personally into the setting. That's what it set out to do, and that's exactly what it accomplishes, weaving your player character stories into Nighthaven. Once the primary threat is dealt with, the vampire madam that set it all in motion is probably still out there, and the ramifications of an angry undead lady pimp blaming the party for foiling her plot excited me, so Ryan included an expansion or possible follow-on adventure that takes place in a single location, but packs plenty of flavor, horror, and danger. If the players decide to confront the monster's maker after taking him out, Caletrix runs to ground and hides within the Liminal Temple where she was embraced. The temple goes into lockdown with traps, armed guards, and alert defenders to keep the sanctuary safe. I would love to go page by page reading the details to you, really digging into it, but this video is already long enough, and I want you to experience this for yourself, for your mind's eye to get this horror fed into it afresh. Now, I can say that we get a inspiringly dark, evil ritual and grisly feeding chambers, guarding an artifact of unfathomably bad implications. It is possible for the party to witness one of the black liturgies that take place here, to honor the demon dragon Liminus. And it's possible that evil player characters might want to join the Liminal Temple. So that's yet another faction that you could join. With Corpse Walk concluded, we wrap up with appendices. We've got random encounter tables, stat blocks for generic and named NPCs introduced by the module, rules for black powder guns and explosives that are frankly the best I've seen, and with some satisfyingly creative effects. We also get some really cool magic items I'm totally going to use. To give a few magic item examples, let's start with the Blink Dagger. This is a dagger with a hilt wrapped in blink dog hide, with a blink dog's fang worked into the pommel. The dagger allows its wielder to teleport directly to it, up to 30 feet away, as a move action. The wielder must be able to see the dagger to teleport to it. And the Rake agrees that this thing is cool, saying, "Nothing inspires fear, quite like throwing a dagger into the wall behind someone, and then appearing right there to instantly plunge it into their back. It also beats the hell out of climbing." That's cool. That's character to a magic item. There's the Hangman's Hook, which is quite the backstory. A king of the wall climbers named Hardigan used this grappling hook to make a fortune, right up until he robbed the wrong wizard and was found hanging from it the next day. Well, his spirit possessed it, and now this thing can do all kinds of stuff. The Rake sings its praises succinctly, quote, "Can you imagine breaking into a noble's house with a grappling hook that pulls you up the wall, lowers you into his treasure room, strangles the life out of his house guards, and then pulls you and the loot back out of the house? All things considered, having the spirit of a psychopath whispering in your ear is a small price to pay." There's concealable weapons, night steel armor, an item that will piss off any vampire you use it on. And we close up with a bit of vampire lore written by one of Willem the Slayer's ancestors, and the players can come across this during Corpse Walk. And that's it for the review. The Rake's Codex of Nighthaven, Volume 1, The Gates and Their Guardians, set out to introduce the setting, provide joinable factions for your players, an adventure, and new interesting items, and it succeeded in all those categories. I found the setting interesting, and I like the dragons as demon prince level threats piece. The factions are awesome, and here I might have had a little bit of influence because when Ryan told me he was wanting to work up factions for play, I suggested, hey, have you checked out the On Guard game, because the rules for the regiments and the different ranks that go in those might help give you a template to work with, and I can clearly see some of the inspiration there. But these also make great templates for coming up with your own factions because you have different examples to look at. They have different features. So you know you need a history, a rank structure, how the player gets in, how they advance, what are the benefits, what are the costs, and those sweet, sweet occupational hazard tables. Mwah. So that was cool. And the adventure was gnarly, and I was impressed with the items. So even if I hadn't edited this thing, this would all be right up my alley. Now, I had a few questions that I hadn't asked Ryan before about his inspirations for the book and some of the design decisions he incorporated into it. And he was good enough to do an interview to answer those. And since I thought it would be interesting, hopefully you'll find it to be interesting as well. So let's get to it. My dear friends, we're back with dear friend Ryan Howard. We talked to him before. I'm glad to talk to him again. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Stephen. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And before we get into the questions about the Rake's Codex Volume 1, I want to say again, it was an honor to get to work on this thing with you. You were so easy to work with, and you came up with such good material. Really proud of what you were able to make with this, and that I was able to help to make sure that it's as good as it could be.
Thank you.
Big props to you, man. So let's start at the beginning there. What inspired you to write the Rake's Codex Volume 1?
So, from the beginning, my biggest inspiration for this thing has always been Sin City. I like fantasy cities. I like to read my Fritz Leiber. I like Lankmar. There's been a lot of good city adventures, but so often RPG city adventures don't have this palpable layer of grime that I feel needs to be present in a good, solid city adventure. So when I sat down to conceptualize how would I do a city adventure, I didn't so much look at the city-based campaigns that came before. I was looking at gangster movies and Sin City and thinking about organized crime, like how it exists in the real world. So that's the kind of ethos that I wanted to play in with Nighthaven. And then at the same time, you have this element of black powder. A lot of people think black powder in fantasy is heresy. I don't agree with that. And I wanted to show people that you can still have a fantastical world that has all the things you want from a good game of D&D while having black powder firearms.
I think you succeeded on both counts, and noir, quality noir is
Thank you.
amazing. I just got done ranting about this short film from the HP Lovecraft Film Festival that's noir, and it was wonderful. And you're talking about Sin City, also very noir. It adds a lot of character and depth to the situations and the people in them to make them more interesting. Because like your typical run-of-the-mill gangster movie where the characters are just kind of cardboard cutouts that do awful things to each other, that's not the most interesting thing in the world. But also, you're right, a lot of fantasy cities, they're plastic, they're kind of fake. But if you go
Yep.
to any major city in this world, you're going to get a lot more of what is in Nighthaven than in these Disneyland kind of cities.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing the marketing materials and the trailers for the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which to this day I still haven't seen. So apologists, just put your swords away. But one of the things that I remember thinking and hearing, it was actually Professor Dungeon Master who I first heard express this. But you see the shots of Waterdeep, and the first thought is it looks like Universal Studios.
Yeah, it does. Whereas it should be a lot dirtier, it should be a lot
Yeah.
nastier. You're
Yeah.
right. Good point. But for the black powder bit, I'm not a fan of guns in my medieval fantasy Dungeons and Dragons material. What you did with it, though, didn't bother me at all. It seemed to fit. It was natural and organic to the setting. I like how you did it. It's dangerous. So kudos on that. I think you pulled it off. Now, was there anything particular in mind that you had to solve the grognard objection to the firearms, or did you just think this is going to be awesome and I'm going to put it in it, and that was it?
So there's this spot of history between the introduction of black powder firearms and essentially the birth of modern warfare that you see right around the 18th century. People think as soon as you introduce muskets, now we're going to be lining up and firing volleys like in the amazing Mel Gibson movie The Patriot. But even in that movie, you still see there's this element of hand-to-hand combat that's still present in warfare during that time. There is a long period, like hundreds of years of history, where armored men and swords and pikes and shields coexisted with firearms on the battlefield. And so to show people that no, as soon as a gun is introduced, you don't automatically lose your sword. You still have swords. They change a little bit. You still have armor. It changes a little bit. But all of these things are still present and still work together. And so, just to remind people of this kind of pike and shot era, English Civil War is kind of the pinnacle of these two things mixing together. So, that style of combat and style of warfare is what I wanted to evoke with my fantasy. And no one's doing that. No one is exploring these things to get the high fantasy of D&D with that style of combat. I just wanted to be able to shoot a dragon with a cannon, and I thought maybe everyone else would too. So like, you're welcome.
But you're so right, because at the Siege of Constantinople in 1453, you had mostly folks with melee weapons. There were a
Mhm.
few cannon that the Turks had, but there were primitive handheld guns. And so everything you just described was happening right then. And that was the dead end, unfortunately, dead end of the Roman Empire, the ancient world, losing its way right then.
Mhm.
But then there was a long period of time where exactly what you described happened, and nobody says that stuff's garbage or unentertaining or not cool. So, good perspective. I like it. And your magic items in general, they seem to have a lot more character and personality
Mhm.
than you might see in a lot of RPGs where they tend to be on the generic side. Like
Mhm.
several of yours have names to them, they have stories, one of them's possessed.
Yeah.
Were you trying to say something with this? Is there a design philosophy you had for it? Tell us about that.
So magic items are difficult. Every player, it seems, they want their magic sword. But how interesting can you make just a continuous variant of this is a magic sword that does extra damage of some variety? And so I wanted to approach magic items in a way where one, they made sense with the world. In the case of something like the Night Steel armor, which is armor that's durable enough to still protect you, but light enough to be woven into clothing, that fit very well in a world where just walking around openly in armor is a crime. So some of it was, what needs to be filled by people in Nighthaven to still have access to force multipliers. And then some of it was just, this is, like I said, a grimy criminal world. And so some of these items belonged to legendary thieves and have properties associated with those legendary thieves. And I wanted to see what kind of cool stuff I could do with that in mind.
Yeah, and that blink dagger. Oh, that's so cool. That's so
Yep.
cool, dude. I love that thing. Yeah, you weren't sleeping on the magic items. They all felt like they were something that was cool and that I would want to have too.
Yep.
None of it felt throwaway. Good work on that.
Thank you.
So I've got a few more design questions for you regarding the module. Faction play. Obviously, a big deal here. I mean, I counted 5 factions that players could be involved in. 3 you've got fully detailed, and they're ready to play. And 2, the Liminal Cult and the Slayers Society, scrappy players and DMs could build on those foundations and figure out ways to get themselves involved in it before new material comes out. Why did you go so hard for factions? In D&D 5e, yes, they have factions, but they're terrible. They're kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
But yours aren't. They make a real impact on the characters that join them. Tell us about that.
What I wanted to do with factions, you'll notice if you read this book, there's not a dungeon included with this thing. So a lot of people might look at that and go, okay, there's no dungeon. What do I do with this? And the answer to that is you need to go join a gang. You need to go get involved. Uh, and that's why faction play is so important to me because having a faction means one, you have access to resources. It's a way to get around. I need to go back into the dungeon so that I can get gold, so that I can get this. No, you can get the weapons and the equipment that you need on a job by job basis, depending on who you're tribed up with. But being involved with factions means that you are going after a certain vector of power within the city, and then there are going to be counter factions that want that same thing. So you have conflict, you have grist for adventure already baked in, and you have a goal in mind. So you're not going into the dungeon like you would in a typical RPG adventure, but you're trying to corner the market on gambling, or you're trying to restore order to a city if you want to join the guard, which is an option. That's another thing I've not seen in many city adventures. What if I want to join the guard? And so I made that an option for people. You can become a guard and you can be that lawful good hero, the good cop in a bad system that wants to bring order to the sector of the city. And that's the third reason why I fleshed out factions so much. This is a portion of the city of Nighthaven. This is just one district. How do you make a partial product feel complete? Or be complete to the people that buy it. You give them plenty of things to do within that small section of the city. And so there's a game designer named Warren Spector who people will know from Deus Ex. He once described his ideal game as a extremely granular, detailed simulation of one city block. And so that's the philosophy that I have with Nighthaven. As I build these districts, they're going to be granular simulations of small areas. And then when you combine them all, you have granular simulations of a big area working together. And the biggest part of that is factions because those are the power players.
And so these factions, is this going to lend itself to future domain play in
Yes.
Nighthaven?
If you want to take over the Knave Syndicate, I want to give you the tools to be able to take over the Knave Syndicate. I've described the roles and responsibilities of the various officers of that particular gang. I've told you what it means to be the captain of the guard. I've set up the structures so that players can topple them if they want to, or take them over or build parallel to them. That's the end goal. Once you get to, level 10, level 15, level 20 in whatever system you're running, you're thinking about, are you a lord? But in this case, it's, you could be a gang leader. You could control the city guard. You could control the city. That'll be in a future module as far as what the government of Nighthaven is like. But ultimately, if you want to become the Baron of Nighthaven, you can do it.
And you mentioned that this is just a piece, which of course this is just the Gate District of the city of Nighthaven. But after finishing reading it like 15 times, I feel like I have an infinite amount of adventures I could do right here.
Yeah.
And part of that would be the occupational hazard tables that you give to each of the factions that people can join. I love them, and they give the DM so much to work with that the adventures write themselves. All you got to do is roll on this chart, maybe decide that this adventure, we're going to your faction, bucko, and we're going to roll regardless. There's not going to be any random thing about if it happens. It's just what's going to happen. And then the prompts that you give, they're interesting, and there's so many of them. how did you come up with so many different ideas? I mean, yeah, there's a little repetition between the lists, but it's still a lot of adventure ideas, man. Why didn't you run out?
So the thing I wanted to do with those tables, because there's multiple, there's one for each faction, and there will continue to be one for each faction as I build this out. The idea there was, if players are in different factions, every month you have to roll on this table. So you can have just complete and utter chaos pop off at the roll of a dice, or you can end up with results that seem to fit together. The idea here is I give you an outline of a prompt, and then the players can pursue that as they see fit. And it's on the players and the GM to kind of come up with, okay, what does all of this stuff mean? Because all I do give you is just the bare outline of a prompt, but it's just ammunition for further adventures within the factions is the point of those occupational hazards tables. Again, it's all about just keeping things moving and keeping things exciting even after you accomplish the goal in Corpse Walk. If you're waiting on Volume 2 to come out, or you just really like Nighthaven and want to keep playing, here's more opportunities for you to explore the city and earn status within your faction and become a power player in your particular sphere of influence.
They're so cool. But why have them at all? Because I haven't seen those in other RPGs. This was quite a few pages, and a lot of
Mhm.
brain power went into making these things. What is it, just that simple, that what you just said, or is there something more to it?
I wanted to go the extra mile with it, and I wanted to reinforce the idea that there's going to be constant conflict between these factions because they want opposite things from each other. If you take a close look at it, every table is divided up into sections, and those sections are basically here's 10 ideas that deal with a specific faction or a specific type of faction. And so, what happens when you come into conflict with the government of Nighthaven? What happens if you come to conflict with religious institutions, or another gang, or incursions from outer planes and demons trying to get you to make deals with it? It's that kind of stuff that I wanted. And I did it because I haven't seen anyone else do it with factions, and factions are the main event here. That's what this is all about.
Heck yeah, I love that answer. In my opinion, it totally achieves the goal that you just outlined, but it also contributes to Nighthaven being a living, breathing place.
Yeah.
Sure, there's different sections of the book. You got your history, you got your factions, you got your corpse walk, you got your other stuff, but it all weaves together so well to create a bigger picture, in my mind at least, that it all felt so organic when I was looking at the occupational hazard tables, because there would be little cues back from the history section of Nighthaven or the faction that I felt, ooh, this plays perfect into that. And so good work, my man.
Thank you.
And you mentioned Corpse Walk, the adventure
Yeah.
that you included in here. That thing, it's cool. And I like the setup. I like the premise. And the way I read the instructions that you've left for the DM, or GM as you like to refer to it, it kind of reads to me more like an equation that references key locations and NPCs, but otherwise it's free range activity for the players and the DM. After the quest gets suggested by the guards, from there, DM, here's the key information you need to know. Run with it. Whichever directions your players go, this is what they might find. And here's the ramifications if they don't solve the bad guy and the problems that he's posing quickly enough. And boy, did they get good.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. It gets friggin' brutal, which is good while you have those city guard escalation tables earlier on in the book, because you might need them if the players
Yeah.
don't chase down the bad guys in the adventure. So you see, once again, it all comes together. It's like you designed it that way. The setup of Corpse Walk isn't complicated, but it doesn't hold people's hands and lead them around saying, okay, here's a room, deal with that, go to the next room, deal with that, go to the next room, deal with that. No real thinking involved. What design considerations did you bring to Corpse Walk to write it how you did? It's very flexible.
So I didn't want to build a railroad. Everything in Nighthaven is built around this idea of freedom of exploration, and I didn't want there to suddenly be a shift in that at the end, just to be like, oh, and run my adventure and forget everything that I told you. Now you have to stick to this linear path. I wanted it to reward players who are going to go seek out information, but at the same time, I needed that element of tension, that ticking clock in the background, where you have have players who are sometimes just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go play Four Knaves Folly in the casino for the next 3 days. And you're like, okay, you want to go on a 3 day bender? That's fine. When you come out, though, you're gonna see the sky is swarming with vampire bats.
It will too. Yeah, it's cool. Folks can deal with just the proximate problem of corpse walk.
Yeah.
But if they are inquisitive, if they are adventurers, if they're really going for it and following up on all the clues, you can go to whole other areas and adventure there. And depending on other circumstances that took place in the adventure, things could be different when you get to the liminal temple, who's going to be there and what might happen. And it's really cool. I like it. Now, some people might say, why write an adventure that you're not guaranteed to get to use every bit of? Well, it's called replayability, and it's building in rewards for folks who are interested in the material and really making the most of it.
Well, and the other aspect of that is if you leave some things unexplored or unsolved, it's still there. Some of it might change. Certain people might slip through your fingers if you aren't thorough in your investigation, but there's still the possibility of if you miss something, you're still in Nighthaven. You can come back to it. And at that point, it's kind of on the GM to be like, okay, time has passed. What's changed here? I've given some prompts as to what's going to happen if you just kind of leave this alone and don't wrap up this particular loose end. Adventures like this don't just end and then, okay, that's resolved. No, there's looming consequences and continuous consequences of everything that you do in this adventure. And so I wanted to make it so that, okay, if you don't see everything, yes, you can go back and replay it and make different choices. But also, if you just keep going from here, you can come back and see, oh, there's this whole thing that I just completely missed out on. And oh, it turns out this was really important. There's a cult loose in the city, and I
That's
had no
great.
idea.
That's great. It's that living, breathing scenario that we're talking about for Nighthaven. Things are messy in
Mhm.
living, breathing environments. They're messy. They're not clean cut. They're not stage managed perfectly. I appreciate the amount of freedom and agency that you give people to do as much or as little as they want with all this stuff and still have a worthy product. I got one other question for you. So, Brother Clement,
Mhm.
Stephen Clements, any relation at all?
No, and I let me
Okay, I didn't
explain.
think so, but still, I'm a little histrionic, so it might have been about me.
I did when I came up with the name, and then you came on as the editor. I was like, oh, that's synchronicity.
So
But
you were thinking about it too. Okay, so it wasn't
yes,
just me being weird. And he's a
but
great character too. I'm like, man, does Ryan really like me or what is it? What is this going on here?
when I name that character, and I've done this before with, if you remember back to O Night Divine,
Yeah,
Nicolas Aldemre, that was taken from the name Saint Nicholas.
right.
With Clement, I wanted a name that was holy, but it wasn't like immediately obvious. And so I just started looking up names of past popes, and Clement was one that stood out. And I was just like, Brother Clement. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. That works.
Yeah, and he was a cool NPC. Whether my last name had any bearing on his or not, appears not. He was still a joy to read, and the poor guy, he's doing the best that he can in a tough
Yes.
situation, which everybody's doing the best they can in the tough streets of Nighthaven. It's just whether they're also looking out for anybody else or they're just looking out for number one. So you did a good job getting all that across. And to make sure that people know, that on Ryan's Substack, there is at least one short story that supports Nighthaven, and it's pretty darn good. I've read it. Do you have any more either already there or in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple more short stories that kind of flesh out the world of Nighthaven, and I have ideas for several. I'm cautious about creating fiction for my world because then when certain NPCs pop up, I'm trying to avoid a Dritz de Warden situation,
Yes.
is my hesitation.
Thank you. That's
But
what killed Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance. The
yes.
novels got so pervasive, it wrote out any room for the players to engage.
But what I hope people will take away from any fiction that I do write, and I will, I plan on writing quite a bit of Nighthaven fiction. Don't treat those events as if they're canon to your game. Some of those characters may be there, but don't act like those events actually happened. These are just little pieces of things that could happen in Nighthaven that I'm writing about. When you encounter Kieran Devitt, the Black Dog of Nighthaven, in, future adventures, or when you encounter Mandrake Hawk or the Bodiless Baron, or, any number of other characters that I've cooked up, if you've read a story about them, don't treat that like that's, something you have to pay attention to. Or if you haven't read the story, don't feel like you're missing out on anything except a good story.
That's a smart move. It's showing that you're learning from the mistakes others have made. And this interview and the Codex Volume 1 show that you're coming up with whole new good ideas. So I appreciate you, Ryan. Hope this does great for you. Hope a lot of people enjoy it. I know I've enjoyed what I've had to do with it. And do you have any parting words for the folks?
If you end up buying this, please leave a rating on drive-thru. Even if it's not a 5-star rating, that's fine. I want your feedback. And I want people to see that, yes, people are reviewing this thing. So if you buy it, please leave your honest review on the Drive-Thru RPG page. That is unbelievably helpful to creators, especially for getting eyes on the product. So just please, if you buy it, review it.
Sweet. Okay, well, I guess since I did buy it, I'm going to leave a review there as well to make sure that people know my take on it. And so, well, thank you, sir. It was good talking to you, and we'll catch you soon.
Absolutely.
The Rake's Codex of Nighthaven, Volume 1, The Gates and Their Guardians, is available on Drive-Thru RPG in both print and PDF format. If you want to hear more from Ryan, he has an extensive back catalog of videos talking about RPGs, and frankly, most of the topics are evergreen, so they are just as worth listening to now as they were when they were released. And that's what I got for you today, my dear friends. Hopefully, I've gotten across to you why I think this thing's cool. Now, what do you think about what I had to tell you? Do you have a copy, and have you read this for yourself? Have you played in some of the sessions that Ryan ran at North Texas Con when he was working on this stuff? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this around to some of your friends that might also benefit from some of the cool work that Ryan did here. And so, my dear friends, that's what I got for now. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the best. And so how did I get involved? The answer is cash. Howard paid me fat stacks. And in this review, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history of the setting, the playable factions that Ryan introduces, and a briefer than usual overview of the adventure. Now, some of you, my dear friends, may be asking, Stephen, my dear friend, God, you're handsome, but why aren't you giving us a step-by-step walkthrough of the adventure like you do in other reviews? Well, first, thank you for your compliment, and I think you're absolutely right on that account, especially coming from someone as good looking as you. And second, I want to keep this review as accessible and useful as possible for a 166-page book. Sure, it's digest size, but it's still a lot of material to cover. Remember, my review of Planescape's Fires of Dis adventure module took 2 one-hour episodes to cover only 64 pages. So we'd probably be looking at something around 4 hours to do the full review. And please, Effendi, let me stop editing for a few minutes so I can spend some time with my wife. If you need to do any stretching or going, you go ahead. Yep.
I am Mother Pheasant Plucker.
And in making this video, I kept promising myself I was going to keep the review short. And as you see from the runtime, that's not happening. And this further reinforces that point I made. Even professional editors need their editors. Would have told me to shut up well before I do.